Alright, so today I wanted to share a writing exercise that I feel like is really cool. It essentially is an exercise in a couple of things, in brevity, but also in negation. And the thought process behind this is that sometimes being brief is better than actually being wordy because it allows you to distill the essence of your ideas in a way that really gets to the root of what you want to say. We're kind of trained in academia to be verbose because we're trying to fill a word limit or we're trying to sound all fancy. But oftentimes it's that simpler distillation of your thought process that really hits home. It feels a bit more like poetry sometimes. And I teach public speaking. I find that my students really struggle with figurative language, with being imaginative, with telling a narrative, not as a series of steps, but as a collection of events that flow together. I teach the narrative arc with the introduction, rising action, falling action, denouement. And even after that, they still have trouble articulating events in their lives in a way that gets to the root of the human emotion or really deeper than the actual step-by-step play of what happens. They're not thinking deeply into these things. They're not searching for meaning. And so I created this exercise to have them create meaning, search for meaning, play with language so that they can begin to understand that it's a very powerful thing. And the way in which we describe things shapes our consciousness and vice versa. So I was inspired to teach this by watching this video. And I'm going to give you a few minutes to watch it yourself. So take your time. I've always wanted to be the educator where kids are screaming in the classroom, but not screaming because it's disorderly screaming, because they're so passionate about what the hell is going on. They want to be heard. They want to make a point. And to see that this exercise brought this out of them, I immediately was like, I'm going to keep that in my back pocket. And so I structured this assignment around that in order to get my students to engage with the unknown. I purposefully don't tell them what this exercise is supposed to teach them. I ask them to reflect on what they've learned. And in this way, I think it's slightly constructivist in the way that I'm not handing them any sort of moral. They're going on a self-exploration, a journey that I'm guiding them along, and then they use their powers of interpretation to not necessarily guess why I assigned it, but to tell me what they experienced. And in structuring it that way, I actually realized that I was teaching them more than I ever intended to. So first I'm going to walk you through the assignment that I structured. I start with this slideshow that includes different figures of speech, just to get them to understand, that should be an X, all the different things that you can do with language. Now, a lot of these are common, but they might not know the actual definitions or where they show up in the world, so I provide examples. I then show them different poems that do a good job specializing in particular things. So this one I highly recommend if you've never seen this, one of the most beautiful poems I've ever heard. Focuses on imagery and narrative telling. This one focuses on sort of creative arcs where you're not revealing the punchline until the very end. This one focuses on pacing, pauses, switching voices, switching tones while telling a story to embody different people or different versions of the same self. In this one, she uses a childish voice to kind of mimic her younger self. This one is about the way that your body influences your language and how your hand gestures can add power to your storytelling as well as your voice inflection. So forth and so on. Lots of examples of different things. Milo, shush. After I do all of this, I then show them this the last poetry video that we just watched. And then we transition into this worksheet. So I say, watch this video. Take in the significance of what happens when we muddle the creative process and try to take a stab at something ourselves. I would like you to come up with 5 different sentences. And I encourage them to use original sentences, not super famous ones, even though this does work with famous ones. I then tell them to flip it word for word, but in the exact way that they did in the poem, where you're not necessarily trying to change the meaning of the whole sentence, you're only trying to negate every single word. So if you have a sentence of 5 words, the first word of your first sentence, in the second sentence, that word should be the exact opposite of whatever you think the first word is. The second word, in the second sentence, that second word should be the exact opposite of the second word in the first sentence. Students oftentimes struggle with this because they read a sentence and they try to just negate its meaning instead of negating the individual words in this. And it's because when you do that, you get a sentence that most often doesn't make any sense. So the first time that I assigned this, I noticed that a lot of people were frustrated with how much sense their negated sentence didn't make. And so I added a section onto this assignment in which I told them to then reinterpret the sentence if it didn't make sense. And that is where we find alright, here it is. So I recreated the assignment to then say, slightly rephrase this second sentence, and then additionally interpret the sentence. So tell me what exactly it means. And by doing all of this, my students have written some of the most beautiful things that they've ever written. For example, we decided to begin a new life. You doubted the end of several deaths. You wanted to read a book. You stopped overlooking the lessons. You wanted to read a book. I stopped overlooking the lessons. Snow falls from the sky at night. Ash rises from the ground all day. I am excited for the future. You are nervous against the past. Winter covers the window in white. Summer reveals the door in black. They build a ramp in the snow. I destroyed a slope out of sunshine. That one is so good. They build a ramp in the snow to I destroyed a slope out of sunshine. See, the reason that I added this part where they interpret the sentence is because I found that they were creating these beautiful things. But for the students that are like, well, what the hell does that mean? Actually having them say, well, what do you think it means? What could it mean? Tips them further into exploration where they kind of have to be like, okay, well, what would it mean to destroy a slope out of a sunshine? And then I'm like, I don't know, you tell me. And the things that they come up with are mind-boggling, and they're never what I would have interpreted. So it's just really beautiful. This exercise really gets you into the minds of your students, but it also shows them their individuality. For example, if you write the same sentence on a board and ask your whole class to individually write the negation of it, or you know what I'm saying, to follow the steps of this exercise and write the opposite of each word, I'm pretty sure that most of the students in the class are going to have completely different sentences. And that's because we all interpret the opposite of something differently. What we deem as the opposite of something is based off of our own interpretation of the world. So this exercise shows that to people. It brings that forward. We'll continue. I love to travel the world. You hate to sit in nothingness. In order to heal, you must hurt. Out of chaos, from brokenness, I can't heal. This assignment was more difficult than I anticipated. That dismal is easier than your doubt. Out of the mountain of despair, a stone of hope. In the valley of hope, dust of despair. Oh, so good. Out of the mountain of despair, a stone of hope. In the valley of hope, dust of despair. Follow your bliss, flee my torture. I did not bow down to you. I bowed down to all the suffering of humanity. You did stand for me. You stood for all the joy of nothingness. Ugh, literally gives me chills. We have nothing to fear but fear itself. You have something to love but love itself. Be kind to others. It costs nothing. Don't act harsh to yourself. It costs everything. Let go of the past. Grow forward. Hold on to the future. Fail backwards. What is meant for you will come to you. What contradicts me will depart from me. I am a small piece in a big world. You were many big holes outside of small voids. You were many big holes outside of several small voids. Traveling became extinct during the pandemic. Staying at home remained alive outside of health. My mother sacrificed her dream so I could dream. Your father took his nightmare even though you can't experience. Every time I travel, I meet myself a little more. On rare occasions, you stay put. You avoid yourself less. Let our scars fall in love. Stop my perfection from rising out of hate. Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. Failure is final. Success is fatal. It is the fear to stop that counts. Unable are the loved to die, for love is immortality. Able are the hated to die, for hate is mortality. The brain is wider than the sky. The ignorance is narrower than the darkness. Alright? So some of the sentences that students have given me, and some of the feedback I have. Although a weird takeaway from this assignment, I value that I learned that nothing in life is completely opposite. Moreover, flipping sentences can provide a fresh perspective on common phrases and proverbs, leading to new insights and understanding. A student said, "The thing that helped me was not thinking so hard and just typing the first thing that I thought. Maybe this exercise was to remind us to open our minds to things that don't make sense at the beginning." Another student wrote, "I'm a perfectionist. The opposite assignment is tough for me because it is hard to give a perfect answer. I learned through this process that I need to be comfortable with being uncomfortable." Another student wrote, "This exercise definitely opened up my mind, and I think it would be a good way to become more comfortable with word choice. Wordplay involves the manipulation of language to create new meanings, sounds, or structures. It requires creativity, spontaneity, and a willingness to take risks and experiment with language. The exercise of flipping sentences can be both a challenge and rewarding. It requires the individual to think outside the box, to see words in a new way, and to challenge their own assumptions about language. Through this exercise, one can discover new meanings, new perspectives, and new ways of thinking." That one, I was like, well, yeah, absolutely. That was the goal. And then lastly, a student said, "Overall, this exercise helps to develop creativity, critical thinking, and communication skills. It allows me to explore the possibilities of language to communicate in new and exciting ways." And then just one more example of how cool this assignment is when it comes to the interpretation. So one of my students wrote, "Life is like the ocean's tides." And then she flipped a sentence and said, "Death isn't like a sky's cloud." And so for me, I was thinking, it's saying that death isn't something that is going to be comfortable. Death is going to be uncomfortable. It's painful. You're going to have to figure out how to navigate through it. But her interpretation is this: death isn't like the clouds that are looming all over you from above. It actually feels freeing. And when it's time for you to go, it's time for you to go. Mind-boggling. That's really all that I have with you. Encouraging you to give your students assignments, even if you don't know what the outcome is going to be, just try. Because you're learning like they're learning, and we should play like they play. Our curiosity, our desire to keep pushing the envelope and pushing the bounds of our thoughts is something that we should always keep with us. Curriculum doesn't need to be proven to work all the time. Sometimes you just got to try new things. Thank you.